Hi, everyone. I'm Pascal Hansen, CEO and financial strategist at Zada, which is a boutique firm created to help business owners achieve more through business planning, education, and consulting. One thing that makes this unique is that we work with a vast network of vetted experts and strategic partners to help our clients keep thriving. And today I'm delighted to have a conversation with one of our experts, Marc Stoiber, who's a brand consultant. He's an Elevate contributor. So Elevate is our online course for business owners. And yeah, I'll get Marc to explain some of the stuff that he does, and we'll go from there. So Marc, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do.
I came up in the world of advertising as a writer and then a creative director, and had a kind of an interesting background because I started work in Hong Kong, and then I went to Europe, and then I came back to North America, and I shuttled between Toronto and Vancouver a few times. And so, I mean, what I learned from that experience is working in a multicultural setting, reducing concepts and ideas to universals, which has come in very, very handy now, because the more you can simplify an idea, usually the more powerful it is. So I had an interesting background. I became a turnaround creative director at my last few ventures. So I helped turn around 3 major agencies. And what that taught me was to pay more attention to the actual business. A lot of people in the creative space tend to spend their time thinking about creative concepts. I did that, but I also had to worry about the viability of the company that I was working for and how to make it better. So that gave me a fairly unique training. I then went on my own, and I started an agency called Change, which was all about making sustainability sexy. And I successfully exited that after 5 years, and went on my own as a consultant. And today, what I do, I work primarily with entrepreneurs, usually in the tech space, who are successful. They have a successful product, but because they are moving towards an event like a raise or a sale, what they've discovered from investors and M&A people is that their brand is holding them back. And their brand is a bit of a boat anchor. And so they have to get that into shape if they want to get a higher valuation for their company. And that is generally where I get called to help them make their brand more effective so that they get a higher valuation. That's what I do.
And that's such a key thing. And I think it's something you probably typically wouldn't think about when you're getting ready to sell a business. But when you mention it, it just makes so much sense. I mean, it's
well, the thing is, a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with are engineers because they're in tech. And so they focus on product. And there are only 2 things. There's only product and brand, right? A product is what it does. A brand is how it makes you feel. And if you want to keep going back to the well and having to sell the same thing over and over and over and over again, that's what happens when you focus on product alone. When you focus on brand, people start to get an affinity for you. They feel you in their heart. And so you don't need to remind them constantly. They will come back. They'll tell their friends about you. Their friends will start to like you. You'll start to do business without trying so hard. And I mean, that is a huge benefit, not to mention the benefit of being able to pick you out in a crowd of products that are usually kind of the same. So those are the values of a brand, and it's only fuzzy until you talk to M&A people and investors, and they really understand that there's a dollars and cents value to this stuff.
But that also relates to other important services you provide, like helping people craft their story, which is your lessons in Elevate, because it really doesn't matter whether you're starting your business or trying to sell it. You have to be really good at explaining what you do and what value you bring to the table. So I know you help business owners with that as well. Do you want to expand a little bit?
It's well, I mean, I think it was Steve Jobs who said the masters of the universe are storytellers. And it's true. For business, story is a wonderful way to wrap a lot of hard data up in a way that people will remember it and tell their friends. And ultimately, everybody in business wants to be able to tell somebody something and have that person tell it to their friend. That's the cheapest form of marketing there is in the world. To make yourself memorable enough and that you resonate with people enough that they will tell your story for you. So in order to do that, you have to have a story. And most of us usually don't go beyond the facts and figures of our business. This is what we do. This is what the product does. Here's how fast it works. Here's how much it costs. We never go beyond that. People don't remember that stuff. What they remember is how you started the company, the obstacles you went through, the people you gathered along the way, the insights you had, the oh wow moments that you had, and the way you're now moving from success to success. You tell them something like that, chances are they're going to remember you a lot longer. And if you're lucky, they'll tell your story. So yeah, major, major area of focus.
So that word of mouth advertising is still the most effective, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, here's why. You can wrap it up in whatever you want. You can call it brand ambassador. You can call it testimonials. You can call it case studies. But the fact is, as soon as you have somebody telling your story who wasn't paid to tell your story is more effective. As soon as you tell your story, people go, huh, they've got a vested interest. This person wants to make money. That's why they're telling me. Or this influencer is telling me because they get an affiliate fee. They get paid $50 every time they tell this guy's story. It doesn't wash.
The credibility is not there.
Credibility is not there.
Yeah.
But if I can get somebody who was a customer to talk about how miserable their life was before, how they discovered me, the trepidations they went through on the way to working with me, what working with me was like, the magical solution that they came up with, and how their life is so much better, I'll listen to that story, and it's completely legitimate. They're not getting a nickel for it.
Right. And another thing you do, which again, any stage of your business that you're in, is the presentation. Like, what's a good elevator pitch? How do you prepare a deck to investors? I mean, investors are typically very hard. They want to get down to the facts. You have to be very succinct. I know so many people trying to raise funds, you look at their pitch deck, you listen to them speak, and I'm like, they're leaving out all the important stuff. They're not answering questions, and they might be very excited and they think it's all about making things look pretty, and then key elements are missing. So they've lost before they've even done. So talk a little bit about that and the competition.
Well, what I do, I work with entrepreneurs to craft the story part of their speech. I am definitely not the best person to ask when it comes to getting your financials presented in a way that investors look for. However, what I do every time I work with an entrepreneur, I assembled a dragon's den, investment bankers, other entrepreneurs who have raised the same amount of money, stuff like that. Yeah. So they backfill all the credibility or all the information that investors need to hear in order to check that box. What I do, though, is make the entrepreneurs unforgettable. And I have a long, long history of doing this, in that when I worked as a creative director, I pitch for a living. So we would go and pitch new pieces of creative to a client, some crazy newfangled idea that would cost them $1 million to make. Or I would stand up in front of prospects and I would pitch against 5 to 10 other agencies so that we would get their business. So this was every bit as hard as pitching for investment. In fact, I'd say it's probably more hard because it was more commoditized. All of us were virtually the same, so we had to kind of invent our differentiators, which
internal sell that you have to do within the agency. Those are probably your toughest critics, right?
Well, the agency, the problem with agencies is the problem with every other business in the world, in that if you're inside the bubble or inside the jar, you believe that things are important that outsiders don't care about. Right. So, for example, one of the big ones that I remember pitching and scratching my head about was we had a big focus on integration, integrated services, digital print, television, radio, all that, back when that was when people still cared about that. And we said, we're integrated. But if you flip the telescope from the client's perspective, they didn't care. They didn't care. All they care about was money. They care that if they put something out there, that they're going to get money back. They spend money, they make more money. And so we could talk about integration till the cows come home. So yeah, oftentimes it was very, very hard. And I find this with entrepreneurs as well, that come to Jesus moment where you say, you might think you're charming, but nobody else gives a crap. The way I do that, though, is a very, very easy way to remind people what's important, and that is by interviewing their customers or their prospects.
Market research.
Well, yeah, but just a little bit of insight work, just finding the truth. Market research gets a bad name. Focus groups are bad. Focus groups are terrible. Online research is terrible. Yeah. They're good for quantification to validate a hunch. But if you really want to find out what the truth is about what makes a product or a service special, you want to sit down with a person and have a coffee. You don't need to have that many coffees to get the insights, but you need to have coffees or phone or video calls like this, because people say the darndest things, especially if you continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper with them. And they will spew out stuff that's pure gold without knowing that they said it. And then you just give it a bit of a creative twist and feed it back to them, and they think you're a genius.
Right.
All the time they've given you the idea. But with an entrepreneur or with people inside the agency, you have to say, this is what folks on the outside are actually thinking. And you have to listen to that, because if you don't, you're going to be talking right by them. And they're the ones with the credit cards, not you.
Going to miss the mark. So tell us a little bit about the story with the startup in Victoria where you helped them prepare for the TD Bank competition.
Oh, that was a great story.
Tell so many people about that. So
yeah, that's a great story. A couple of years ago. So I'm since worked with a whole bunch of different entrepreneurs out there, pitches, successful pitches, but this one was kind of special. The Victoria Hand Society, they make prosthetic hands for people who get their hands cut off. And they make them on 3D printers. They don't make them in Canada. They make them in places like Uganda and Rwanda and South America and places in Asia where there's a lot of rural people living rurally in agriculture where getting your hand cut off is still a thing. And they don't have the money and they don't have the time to go into the city to get a new handmade for themselves. And so they're disabled, badly disabled, as opposed to moderately disabled for the rest of their life. So what these guys did, they went into the local clinics in small towns and all these places with big rural populations. And they taught the local clinic folks how to use a 3D printer. And they created these 3D prosthetic hands at a fraction of the cost, at 10 times the speed that they would normally get them. So that's an interesting story. That's the background. What they were doing in Canada, they didn't have much call for prosthetic hands, but what they did, they also created scoliosis braces. So braces if you have a curvature of the spine. And scoliosis afflicts a disproportionate number of girls rather than boys. And so what you've got is a whole bunch of girls living in rural communities in Canada who can't get a scoliosis brace. And so they are living with this disability for the rest of their life, which greatly inhibits their confidence and their ability to achieve their natural potential. Mm-hmm. So that's the story that was in my head, not in their head. Their head, they just made scoliosis braces. They got an opportunity to pitch the TD Challenge $1 million prize. They were up against a whole bunch of not-for-profits that were much more sophisticated, much bigger than them. And I said, what are you going to pitch? And they said, well, we're going to talk about how we make these things, 3D printers and the technology and the this and how much it costs. I said, forget all that stuff. None of that stuff matters. The only thing somebody at TD cares about is what kind of a story it's going to give them. And the story it's going to give them is that you're helping young women and girls achieve their natural potential and not be held back by a disability. And if you can give them that story, You will win. And they did. They beat all these big charities. They won $1 million, and it's a pretty significant amount of money for a charity that is three people
Right.
up at University of Victoria. So it's not, it's not the United Way or anything like that. It's not a monster charity. $1 million goes a long way when it comes to building scoliosis braces. And I love that because it was a
What a
flip.
great cause. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a flip of the story. It was 180 degrees removed from the story they wanted to tell.
Yeah.
It tells you the importance of understanding your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the story. Thanks, Mark. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a random question that I ask everyone I've interviewed. If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Tough question. Tough question. I don't know. I'm going to go for the old conventionals. Winston Churchill.
Okay.
The reason I say Winston Churchill, I read his biography, and this guy achieved so much in his life, and he lived to a good old age too. But I mean, by the time he was 26, he'd already written a couple of major books, fought in a war, worked in government, and it was unbelievable. And he seemed to sleep a lot, and he seemed to get drunk a lot.
Oh,
And I have no idea how he did it. And I would love to just hear from Winston Churchill how the hell he managed to do all that stuff while still being, moderately drunk and having his naps.
and then sleeping a lot. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's a talent.
Oh my God. And you're just like, how do you, well, I think it had a lot to do with private school, or what they call it in the UK, the public school system, the self-finance school system. I think more than anything, they taught the kids there how to believe in themselves,
Right.
and that everything they did was right,
Yeah.
whether it was or not. And so it gave them an inordinate amount of confidence. And I think that's what made them go, yeah, of course I can do that.
Yeah.
Of course I can. And whereas
must have been very focused with the time he was working, if he's like,
oh my God,
sleeping the other half of the time.
I think he was also very good at delegating. He was very good at bringing people aboard to back translate what he just said onto a piece of paper. Right. I know he usually had a few secretaries, but so I think the man was a genius. I mean, he took such an interest in the history of the UK that he could write, dozens of books on the subject. What can you write dozens of books about? I certainly can't write a book about anything like that. But the fact that he then did it and did it and did it and did it, I'm in awe. Yeah. And drunk.
Yeah, some of my favorite quotes are actually from him. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill was an amazing guy. Him and Oscar Wilde had some of the best quotes I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. For everyone watching and listening, thanks for listening. Do check out Mark's lessons in Elevate. Follow him on LinkedIn. He always has something interesting to say. Thanks so much, Mark.
Talk to you soon.